So right now we are behind the Lazy Man compost and the chicken coop. This is also high ground. It is very nice and green, and originally I thought it would be a great place to build a house. And perhaps it still will be in the future, but for now we're gonna utilize the shade underneath these trees and build another large bodega for this side of the river. Obviously the little bodega is floods and is fine for glass storage, but we want to build something over here that we can store water sensitive things in and not have it flood. And it'll be nice because this is becoming the center of our garden space. And we kind of have our future pit garden area over there, and as you see, yeah, we're just right behind the other nice kind of sitting garden area that will be kind of a hangout spot. And then I'm hoping this area on this side near the lagoon, where it's a bit swampier and less nice, will be kind of more just for production, just for papaya circles, banana circles, really digging into the whole hippie permaculture thing. Yeah, so anyways, I wanted to turn that little hill in this area into a good spot for a stage and a show and have little concerts, but them's the breaks. It's a low spot, collects lots of water. My first reaction was to try and figure out how to drain this water off into the river, and mostly by going around that way back towards the garden area and draining it kind of through the road and just taking it straight up back into the river. But after calming down and realizing that quite lucky to actually have this much water catchment right here, we're gonna change it into a nice area for pit gardening, build some swales, spread this water out so that we don't have to irrigate it nearly as much once the dry season comes. So behind me you can see the lagoon. You can see some banana and plantain trees that we got from Jorge's grandfather that we sort of just had to rush plant just for space reasons. And then over here you see all of this brush from this recently cleared land. What we're gonna do is we're gonna pull down this fence right next to me, turn this all into one big planting area using swales, trenches, and pit gardening to pull water off that lagoon. What we do have going on up against the lagoon, and even though it does change its size with the rain, this has pretty much been the edge for the most part, which has been great because we have these little baby elephant ears coming in. This is taro, which is a root vegetable. It's purple. It's been growing in popularity, so you might see it at some of your markets. So the reason we have the elephant ears or taro up against the water and why we're trying to propagate them is because they do really well right next to water. They can soak it up, they love it, they don't suffer from being saturated nearly as much as other trees do or other plants. So we're gonna have these guys involved in the whole pit gardening process over here to make sure that when we do have floods, when we do have heavy rains, that they're kind of our frontline plants soaking up the water, taking the standing water for the team, and still thriving with it. So that's basically the plan. So even though it's great to have an exit strategy for all this water when it floods, which is obviously the river. Send all the water towards the river, it's where it naturally wants to go, and that helps my property not get too saturated, and which is great for developing it in certain ways. But at the same time, I also want to make sure I'm trying to collect and harvest as much of this rainwater runoff as I can, and send it through tree systems and have it get added back to the groundwater. Now, living near the river, my groundwater is usually pretty high. I haven't used it much yet. This will be our first dry season pulling from it for irrigation. We'll see how it affects it, but I'm pretty confident that we won't run the well dry. It's a pretty shallow well, so I'm not too worried about overusing the groundwater, but still, I want to do my due diligence and harvest and collect as much rainwater as possible. Now, there's a ton of ways I want to see this happen in the far future, but for right now, the quickest thing will be swales and diverting that runoff right there. So I wanted you guys to see this little creek. You know, right now we're very close to the end of it. It just goes around that bend and then empties into the river. Right now, you know, it's running alongside our future pit garden area, where we'll have plenty of trenches collecting water from that giant catchment area. But what I wanted to show you was a space a little farther up the creek and give you an idea of what our plans are to try to utilize these creeks as much as possible. Like I've said before or in other videos, really trying to make use of the rainwater. I'd like to avoid using our well water as much as possible for as long as possible throughout the year. Of course, I want to irrigate some areas, keep them green year round just for aesthetics, but ideally we're not putting too much pressure or stress on the groundwater system. So here's this nice little area. I think I posted about it. It's where I come and have my morning coffee in the sun. Got some nice clearing right by the creek. It's pretty peaceful. Got some wild penasuelas here. This is how we find them in the group, and we'll cut them up, separate them, and use them as border plants. So here we are. We're up the creek a little bit. Not too far, just, 10 meters or so, about 30 feet. And here, probably from the odd flooding and knocking down most of the taller plants, this area has stayed pretty well clear. Not too much canopy right above us. So behind me you can see the creek and all the green clumps, which are mostly just dead plants is covered in vines. We get kind of these weird, beautiful seas of green, which is when the vines just take over entire areas. So we'll probably clear that area out and try to utilize this runoff to water it. Oh, Olive's freaking out. She hates rain.